Hello and welcome to our ALPS webinar on using Connect Interactive for Key Stage 4 result analysis in 2020. Today I'm going to begin by taking you through very briefly the national picture in England. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but it will put a good context into today. I'm also going to break away from result analysis for a short period to talk about tracking student progress in 2021, because you're all facing two problems with current year 11. One, of course, the excessive issues they've all struggled with through lockdown and not being able to attend school fully, however well you've managed to keep them engaged remotely. Secondly, of course, they're the first cohort to have come through Key Stage 2 with standardized scores instead of levels and sub-levels. And I'll be showing you just exactly how you can set aspirational goals for those young people using our minimum expected grades and track them with confidence towards achieving outstanding progress in 2021. Mainly, however, I'm going to be showing you, demonstrating to you how to use the tools and features in Connect Interactive, both when evaluating your results against historic results and when comparing your results in 2020 with the monitoring grade points that you uploaded to Connect Interactive at earlier points in the academic year. And of course, when I'm doing the latter, I'm partially aiming to show you how to use Connect Interactive most effectively when you upload grade points for your current year 11 and indeed year 10 during the forthcoming academic year. So without any further ado, let's have a quick look at the national picture in terms of Key Stage 4 results in 2020. Well, we all know what happened the previous week. The algorithm had its ugly way with the A-level results, but within days, the algorithm had been booted into touch, later to be described as a mutant algorithm by Mr. Johnson, and the calculated results were no more, and the centre assessed grades, the CAGs, had taken over and been awarded for A-level. And of course, then 3 days later, on the 20th, young people all around the country received their GCSE results based on the CAGs. We can't exactly, therefore, which we can at A-level, show you the absolute difference that awarding the CAGs made. But Ofqual very helpfully at the end of July did, when they were saying why they weren't going to be able to use the unstandardized CAGs, they did tell us that actually using the CAGs would put results up by 6 points, 6% at grade 7 and 9% at grade 4. And if we take those 6% and 9% away from the 7+ and 4+ figure, you can pretty well see that the results would have been very comparable to the 2019 results. You might be wondering about the gaps in the table. That's because the JCQ only published tabulated figures at 7+, 9, 4+, and 1+ in 2019. However, you can definitely see that awarding the CAGs did lead to the inflated results that possibly Ofqual had been for perhaps too long resisting. So we can't tell you for certain, but there's a fairly good steer there that nationally results boomed because of the CAGs, except until last Friday, the level 2 BTEC results, which have just been confirmed to you, and hopefully you're now happy with those as well. So what were the consequences of all this for schools in England this summer? Well, we're guessing that actually the national rise in grades has probably been mirrored in many schools. And therefore, it's very likely for those using ALPS that you must now, I expect, have higher value added based on your CAGs than you would have done if the slightly unknown algorithmic Key Stage 4 results had been issued. Not so much about results, but it's also very likely that you've got a bumper crop of youngsters who've joined the sixth form having done well at GCSE, including, as indeed there were over 25% grade 7s nationally and over 40% grade 6s, more students with the grades needed to access your higher tariff entry A-level courses, for example, typically maths, biology, chemistry, and physics. So, moving on, I'm going to step aside from that for 5 minutes to talk about Year 11 in 2021 and tracking their progress against the standardised scores they achieved at Key Stage 2 when they left primary school. I expect you all very well of the phrase minimum expected grades and MEGs, which is the way we prefer to describe what are often called our targets. They are challenging and they're set at the top 25% based on students with similar prior attainment, but they're never intended to be ceilings. And every year, students in every school using ALPS across the country exceed them. And indeed, that's led to most aspirational schools setting additional challenge where that's appropriate in what we call personalised targets, or if you like, challenge targets for individual youngsters in individual subjects. However, this is the first year, as I said earlier, that the cohort have come into Year 11 with scaled scores. And I'm going to briefly describe what we've done before I take you through the table at the bottom. Our very skilled data team have crunched all the 4 years of scaled score results and lined them up against the percentages of the cohort that used to achieve, for example, 5A, 5B, 5C, etc., using the old levels and sub-levels system. And as you can see, the table is giving you exactly where we think, based on 4 years of data, the scaled scores line up against the sub-levels. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the top one, 5A, the most able based on Key Stage 2 cohort in secondary schools, we are confident that that lines up with a score of 115 plus in terms of the scaled scores. If you want a more general guide, so supposing you're thinking of the HPAs, the higher prior attainment students who would have been 5.0 plus, we're saying that's 107 plus. The MPAs, who were 4.0 plus, that looks like 96 plus. Now, this is going to enable you to set MEGs, set personalised targets based on those MEGs, and challenge youngsters to really make outstanding progress in the year ahead. The MEGs are lined up in the final column, and I've also taken the liberty of including the latest 88 estimates from February 2020, and clearly there are not going to be any new ones based on 2020 outcomes, to give you a good sense of how those line up against our MEGs. And finally, there's a full briefing paper available on the ALPS website dealing with all of this issue in considerably more detail, and you might like to access that at your leisure. So, moving aside and back to the main diet of today, we're going to be now looking at how to use Connect Interactive to best effect in the academic year ahead. And I'm going to just show you 2 or 3 slides and then get into the demonstration. I doubt if this really needs explaining at all. At a click of a mouse, you can move from whole cohort analysis to a subject, to a teaching set, to either a student group or an individual student, and indeed, as long as the tutors have been uploaded into Connect as well as the subject teachers, you can also bring the tutors into the game by expecting them to not only obviously take great pastoral care of the youngsters in their tutor group, but also to take a keen interest both in their in-year progress and indeed their final outcomes. Lots of questions here that are very answerable through Connect Interactive. Great questions to ask, whether it's end of year results or in-year monitoring data, and there's many more that I'm sure you would have lined up in your own school and would be keen to get the answers for in order to drive improvement and to raise student achievement even further in the year ahead. What I'm going to do today is mainly concentrate on result analysis. First of all, the results against historic results, and secondly, the results against monitoring grade points. It's all going to take place in a fictitious academy called High Spirits Academy, and some of their monitoring grade points are going to be mocks and predicted grades, but we're also very keen in ALPS on the phrase monitoring point 0 or MPZ, which in schools that use it is the grade point that's established at the start of each academic year for the cohort based on teacher assessment at the end of the previous year. Now, we're well aware with the lockdown that actually you may not have that data right here, right now. In the fancy world, or fantasy world, perhaps I should say, of High Spirits, we've got it, but we're well aware that creating the monitoring point 0 may take you the next month or so as the teachers begin to see who's settled in best, how they're doing, and indeed thinking back to who engaged best with remote learning when they were in year 10. A few brief reminders. I can't do all the basics today, and indeed, if you need more help with that, I'm going to put a web address up on the final slide after the demonstration, showing you where to go to look for the whole range of ALPS webinars that get run during the year, from those that are fairly basic through to our ALPS Champions website that try to encourage the keenest enthusiasts for ALPS in each school or college to drive the culture of ALPS and the use of ALPS really heavily into the culture of the school or college. So, really briskly, what do you need to know? 9 grades, 1 to 3 are outstanding. If you achieve them, you're red hot, you're towards the boiling point in the thermometers that we visually use to give you a good sense of progress. If you're in the black, you're in the safe zone. A grade 5 will be roughly equivalent to nationally average. So if you had a grade 5 in a year when progress 8 was going to be announced, which of course it is not this year, you'd be somewhere around 0.00. You might be above, you might be below, but you're not going to be a million miles away from there. If you drift into grades 7 to 9, They turn blue, they're cold, they're areas for improvement. They're areas to think about prioritizing in the year ahead. A couple of numbers, because you don't need a mathematical degree to get ALPS. A score of 1.00 in ALPS anywhere means the minimum expected grades have on average been achieved. And 0.2 in either direction represents a whole grade per student at Key Stage 4. So for example, a score of 0.80 is on average, each student was a grade below their MEG. And 1.20, which does happen, would be each student on average is a grade above their MEG. So red is hot, blue is not, and without any further ado, I am now going to leave the PowerPoint for later, just to finish off with a slide or two before I say bye-bye. I'm also going to stop my webcam being visible so that we can all absolutely concentrate on Connect Interactive. And here we are. And I'm first of all going to show you what I've chosen in terms of the grade point selector that's up here. My main grade point is this summer's results. And I've chosen the previous 3 years' results as my comparisons to begin with. So I'm not changing anything, I'm clicking OK, and we're good to go. I'm going to begin here with strategic analysis and start with an ALPS template, and clearly, of course, click Key Stage 4 and select the main provider report and create it. I could have chosen a comparison group, saw how, for example, boys were getting on against girls or the pupil premium students against their peers, but I'm going to do bits of that later. For the moment, I'm just going to create the report and leave the comparisons for further on in the presentation. Doing that gives you effectively all of your strategic review pages. It's not terribly interactive, but it's a quick way of getting to the basic results. So you can see on the far end here, your raw results tabulated. And they should, of course, be identical to what's in your management system or SIMS. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll dwell on this one, I think, the multi-grade point summary. That's where we, overall for the school, band the students by prior attainment, show what those students in each band were batting against at the 75th percentile, and show you how through time they've got on. And my reason for clicking on this one is, to be honest, because this fictitious High Spirits Academy, after the halcyon days of 2017, has struggled a bit with the most able students based on Key Stage 2. And even in the submission of CAGs this year, that's still visible. So there's definitely a school improvement priority here, and we'll try to drill down to where that exists most as we go through the data later on. Finally, the strategic overview itself with its ALPS grades, and without going through all of the indicators and exactly what they mean, that, I'm afraid, is another webinar that you'll need to book on. You can visually see how red everything has been here for 4 years. So High Spirit is a high achieving, value added school at Key Stage 4. They've had similarly high and significantly plus Progress 8 scores for the previous 3 years, and they've gained strong ALPS value added again this year, but not totally out of kilter with what's gone on before. You can see that this year's results would fit snugly in between those two sets of results there. So this school, like many of you, or most of you, I'm sure, when submitting the CAGs, took what was being said about standardization and subjects being probably pulled down if it seemed schools had been too generous. They've done their best whilst aiming to enable the students to get most likely grades. They've done their best to make sure that it does fit with their prior data. I'm now going to leave all of that. Hold on, John. No, I won't. I'm just going to go. Oh, I will. I'll come back to that later. I think we've done sufficient there for the time being. I'm now going to go to the much more interesting, much more interactive subject analysis zone. And this brings up all of your subjects, how they've got on this year based on CAGs against how they did in previous years. And you can sort. So for example, I'm going to sort by the result in the ALPS grade, I should say, in 2020. And that's bringing up to the top at the minute those subjects that were red hot based on the 2020 results. And you can see how this lines up with previous years. And immediately you can see there's something interesting going on here, because although I said that in the main, this school appeared to have standardized itself, shall we say, it clearly did not do so in terms of double award science. Now, that could be for a whole host of different reasons. Indeed, amongst the melee that was this summer's results weeks, it was said at one point that grounds for appeal would be new leadership in a school and a cohort that was significantly expected to get higher outcomes. Well, it's entirely possible in this school that new leadership in the science department, a resolution that this was never going to happen again, meant that they were really confident that actually this year's results were going to be better. Well, nervous, of course, that they'd be pulled down in standardization, but with standardization gone, they were not, and they were awarded. However, if I sort the other direction, you can see that it looks as though both music and Punjabi, which were both blue the year before, and indeed music the year before that, they perhaps did have their CAGs standardized down before submission to line them up with how things were in the past. Now, I'm going to concentrate on a couple of subjects right now, and you'll be thinking, well, one of those is going to be combined science, and yes, it is, but I'm going to sort by entries and bring the big subject entries to the top. And for the moment, I'm going to be saying I'm entirely happy with all of these grades up here. I'm wishing perhaps that we might have gained just a little bit higher in geography. Big popular subject in our school. So I'm going to click first on geography, and I'm going to have a look at what I can see here. I can see that the girls have outperformed the boys. I can see that the disadvantaged have indeed done remarkably well and outperformed their peers. I can also see how the different teachers have got on, and indeed the different teaching sets. Now, you don't need to upload the teacher names. This just disappears if you don't. Many schools choose that option because, of course, particularly post-16, but even at Key Stage 4, it's not always the case that one teacher has been specifically responsible for those students throughout the key stage. What we can see down here is interesting, because as well as the ALPS grades for these sets, we can see that actually the set taking geography with the highest prior attainment is the set that bucked the trend and turned blue. Now, I'm first of all going to pull the thermometer here, as I'm sure you're all very aware you can do, to find how many students needed to have got a higher grade if geography had been an ALPS grade 3 this year, and it's 18. I'm just actually, instead of looking at the whole of geography, I'm just going to nip into this teaching set instead, and I'm going to go to the students, and I'm going to turn on the what if tool, and I'm going to compare by sorting high prior attainment to the top. I'm going to compare their minimum expected grades with some of what now seems the parlous results they got here. And you wouldn't do this in the real world, but I'm just quickly showing you how, if the students had come close to achieving their minimum expected grades, what a different picture this would have been for this set. But actually, a huge part of geography not being a grade 3, and part of the school not doing so well with the most able students again this year. It wasn't just geography, by the way, but you can see there was an issue here that needs addressing going forward. I'm going to go back to subjects overall. I'm going to do a couple of other things first before diving into double award science. I'm going to show you how easy it is to bring up all of the teaching sets and look for where there's inconsistencies. So at some point, we'll probably want to have a dive into English as well, because you can see, and again, it's the same pattern. The more able sets in both Lit and Lang have performed less well in terms of progress this year based on the CAGs than the young people in the sets below. Can also see the same pattern in French. We've already seen it in geography. And it's not as evident in maths, but the very top set with the highest prior attainment was a grade 6, as opposed to many of the sets that were red hot. Secondly, taking off teaching sets, I'm going to do a couple of the comparisons that you might wish to do. I'm going to look at high, middle and low prior attainment. I'm taking off the unknowns because I'm just wanting to see how the LPAs, MPAs and HPAs got on. It's going to take a moment or two to cook this one because there's a lot going on behind the scene. A nervous consultant might now begin to panic that it was never going to happen, but I can assure you that it most definitely will. And once I've clicked to show all students in one table, we'll be able to clearly see exactly where the HPAs have done less well. So there's the click, there's the tick, and here we are. And if I sort by the HPAs and their ALPS grades, it's as clear as that where my problem of challenging young people successfully to gain grade 7, 8 and 9 exists. And it's so clear for you. This may, of course, not be your school's problem. It might be the other end of the scale. But this is so good at enabling you at a couple of clicks to find out exactly where there are issues. I'm going to reset and show you, I think, one more because they all work the same. And whilst you might say, let's look at disadvantage and the pupil premium against their peers, I'm going to look at gender because I'm sure you'll all agree with me there's an equally big problem nationally between boys and girls at Key Stage 4 that's been terribly exposed in the P8 days. I'm going to show all students in one table again. I'm going to sort by the boys' grades, and actually I'm going to be reasonably pleased that this year I seem to have sorted that much more successfully. And the one that's going to delight me is English language, because I've been having a lot of issues with that and English literature through time. And here the department through the CAGs have delivered very strong outcomes for the boys. I'm going to come back to English though later on. So, am I going to be utterly delighted, however? And I'm just going to go down here and say, well, no, not quite yet. There's still good work to be done, because you can see a range of subjects, some very small, some more substantial like combined science, where even if the boys are doing quite well, they're still not doing as well as the girls. So I think before we start to look at in-year analysis, I will just take you, I'm not going to go to monitoring accuracy, that's far better when we're looking at the in-year analysis. I'm going to go to student analysis and reset the comparison and go to a quick group, the student performance groups, and apply that comparison. And I'm going to look for, first of all, who's on or above target in all subjects. And wow, I've just forgotten to do something, but that's no bad thing because I can demonstrate how to do it. I didn't put the filter on by year group that would remove the sixth formers that we've also got in the school. So I went to filter, I chose year group, I clicked year 11, I added that filter, I've applied it, and those A-level results we are just looking at there right now have disappeared. And again, I'm now going to click onto on or above in all subjects. It's down to 43 now, but we've got some students who've done fabulously, regardless of their prior attainment. They've done absolutely brilliantly to get the grades they have. So for example, regardless of prior attainment, here's a young person with some fairly modest in some subjects results, but they've really, really shone and done brilliantly in terms of progress. Below in all subjects, there's not many of those, but there's 17. And the colours here, black is 1 grade below, 2 is at least 2 grades below, can begin to point you in the direction of the students who I'm sure, even prior to lockdown, maybe drifting throughout the 5 years that they spent in school with you, not being as engaged, possibly huge family issues at home, but these are the students who would have been well aware, made well aware by your head of year during the course of Key Stage 4, and it's very easy to get at those. So I'm now going to leave results against results behind, and I'm going to move. I've been a little bit cheating here, but you can open more than one version of Connect at the same time. And I'll just show you what I've done here, literally just to save time. I've got 2019-20 as my main grade point again, but I've got this against monitoring point 2, which was the predicted grades in February, 20 Year 11 mocks, which took place in January, and the monitoring point 0 based on Year 10 assessments that was uploaded last September at the beginning of Year 11. So clicking on OK, I can see the in-year pattern and inconsistencies that were in it. And you can immediately see where things were bluest, and this will be no surprise to you because it's like this in the vast majority of schools that use ALPS, whether it's Key Stage 4 or Post 16. The mocks, always, for a whole variety of reasons, do not show young people at their best. And thankfully, Williamson's ill-considered plan to make appeals be based on mocks was never, ever put into action. So what are we going to look at here? Well, I'm going to sort by grade again here, I think, and bring my high achieving in terms of results and value added subjects back up to the top. And it immediately reveals that English, language and lit both submitted CAGs that were red hot, but were considerably higher than the grades that were awarded and sent home in February, and significantly higher again than the mock results. Now, I'm going to say here, the mock results often have that impact. Teachers lose confidence and immediately send home reports that have drawn back from the grades that were being considered in the autumn term and submitting ones maybe to try to encourage the young people to work harder in the remaining period of the year without having any idea, of course, that schools were going to lock down within weeks. And they then submitted these grades. Now I am just going to go back to this area and I'm going to bring the subjects back up again, comparing with results. And I'm going to bring again English up to the top. And you can see that what English Lit submitted was entirely consistent with previous year's results and value added. And to be honest, so was English Language, because 1.00 and grade 4 was just a smidgen out of the red. So both these subjects, going back to the in-year data, were, once the head got the department together and sorted through, well, let's be honest, these results here, these predicted grades rather here, were ill affected by the poor performance in the mocks. What do we think the young people would really have achieved? I'm going to pick one of them at random, doesn't really matter which. Let's go for English Language. And I'm going to move to trends, because trends is a fab area that we put together during lockdown, actually largely at the time to try to help schools with calculating the centre assessed grades. Now, I'm going to sort by grade difference, and that's going to bring to the top, to begin with, those students whose submitted CAG was in line with their MP2 predicted grade. Slight difference in that this school, like many of yours, used pluses for those that maybe had the ability to get the next grade up, equals for the most secure on that grade, the minuses for those they feared might fall. But if I sort the other way round, you can see a considerable cohort of young people who gained CAGs that were 2 grades above the grades that went home in February, and another large tranche got 1 grade above. And if you're interested, I'll just do it quickly. You can change the comparison grade point. That makes it the mocks, and you can then see a very, very similar pattern. I'm going to change it back to MP2 and point out that a lot of these students had the same predicted grade sent home as they achieved in the mocks, and the CAGs was actually rectifying, perhaps, as I said earlier, that collapse in confidence in some of the teachers. You can click on any student to see their picture. I'm going to do that absolutely at random. Here we've brought up student 148. You can see their trends in all subjects. You can see the 2 where actually the CAGs were higher than MP2. You can see that in the main, the student had the same grade submitted as MP2. If I pick another one, again, doesn't absolutely matter at all. Going to pick this young person. Again, you can see their trends where they've gained some grades and where the others were the same. And like the overall subject trend, this all came about in lockdown, but we actually think these 2 areas in trends are very much a thing of beauty. Now, moving to the end, I'm going to go to the final zone that we haven't looked at, the monitoring accuracy area. And what I'm going to show you is the examination results simply against the February monitoring point 2 grades. And I'm going to do a couple of things that I think again are really, really useful for you. I'm going to first sort by ALPS score difference. Now, at the minute, I'm looking at some subjects that for whatever reason submitted slightly lower centre assessed grades than the grades that were sent home in February. If I sort it in the other direction, you can see subjects up here that actually sent home lower grades in February and submitted higher ones as CAGs. If we move over to here and the percentage of student grade difference, here's a few subjects that actually sent home grades in February, and those same grades were submitted as the CAGs. Sorting in the other direction, 87% of the Punjabi grades were lower, 86% of the food grades were lower, 59% of the maths grades went up and were higher. Now, having seen any of this, it's again pretty much a click of the mouse to investigate any of that. So if we just nip back 2 subjects and move to maths and move to trends and sort by grade difference, again, we can see that for many students, MP2 was pretty similar to their mock performance, and the grades that were sent off to the exam boards were the holistic grades based on everything the department knew about that student, and those were awarded. So I'm running out of time for you here. So at this point, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. I'm going to move back to the slideshow, and I'm going to bring my webcam up so that I can actually say bye-bye as opposed to just with myself visible. We've looked at Connect Interactive, and I hope that's been really helpful. Thank you very much for taking time to watch the webinar. There's a short evaluation that comes up, and the company are very keen for people to fill them. It won't take you very long. That's the web address for you to access all of our webinars. There's no point me clicking on it because you will all be accessing this at various different times, and what I would show you therefore would not be accurate on the moment that you were going to do it. But finally, if this has whet your appetite and you'd be interested in a video conference strategic review meeting with one of our educational consultants, people like me and my colleagues, based on your actual results, please get in touch. And it would be remote, of course, but you would be in your Connect. We would also be able to access it to impersonate you, so to speak, and we'd be able to have some really, really good conversations about your priorities moving forward, including any in-year grade points you'd already put in place for year 10 or year 12 in the new academic year. Useful numbers at the bottom there are phone line, which although we're all remotely working will be answered, and a good email address if you would like to be in touch with anybody in the education team. If it's specifically for me, just mark it for John's attention. At this point, I'm going to thank you very much and say bye-bye, and every good luck possible, both with the start of term that you're all going through right now as I'm speaking, with fully reopening safely for the young people in your care, and then every good luck moving forward during the year, however the young people end up being assessed this year. And I surely hope we find that out sooner rather than later. But every good luck with that at all levels going forward. And finally, from me, cheerio.